Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. I'm going to be going over one of the games on the 4-game slate, right? I'm going to be looking at that last game, the Ravens and the Bills. So we're going to dive into that one. But before we do, I need to take a look back at the two games that I went over on Wild Card Weekend last week. We had the Steelers and the Ravens, and then I also went over the Broncos and the Bills. Man, 2-0 on that Steelers and Ravens game. A nice little sweep. We go into Sunday with some momentum, feeling good. And then we have a 0-3 dud with that Broncos and Bills game, man. So finished the weekend 2-3, down just over a unit. Not the start that I was looking for, man. After a solid regular season, I was up just over 16 units to close out that regular season. So like I said, man, not the start I was looking for, but look to bounce back, man. We're going to have a good weekend here. A nice little divisional round matchup, like I said, going down between the Ravens and the Bills. So let's go ahead and dive into that. We got the Ravens listed as 1.5-point favorites. The Bills actually opened up as favorites, and it's since swapped over to the Baltimore side. But as you can see, that line is short. 1.5 with an over-under sitting at 51.5. Now, this game's going to kick off at 6:30 p.m. at Highmark Stadium. And the Bills are going to come into this one fresh off of that 31-7 beatdown of the Broncos. And yes, like I said, I was on the wrong side of that one, man, unfortunately. Bo Nix and company, they came out firing on all cylinders, man. Denver's offense, they rolled down the field in just over 2 minutes of action to start this one off. They ran 5 plays for 70 yards, capped it off with a 43-yard strike down to the end zone from Nix to Troy Franklin, take a 7-0 lead. And look, man, the Bills, they be having their own version of that shout song. Y'all know that one, right? You make me want to shout. I don't know if you guys, if you're not a Bills fan, I don't know if you've been to the Buffalo Stadium and seen, after they score, they got that song going. And their fans, there's a point where it's like, hey, let's go Buffalo. Right? So, Nix hits that touchdown to Franklin, and I text my Bronco fan Pops, and I'm like, uh-oh, Buffalo. Like, man, I think, Denver might be onto something here. So, sorry to all the Denver fans out there. I may have jinxed you because after that, it was all Buffalo, right? 31 unanswered points while dominating all aspects of the game. They more than doubled up on Denver's total yards gained, 471 to 224. They held control of the time of possession. So they had the ball for just over 2/3 of the entire contest. And while both teams played a clean game without turnovers, Buffalo also dominated on the ground, outrushing Denver 210 to 79 yards. So that Buffalo defense that had its struggles, down the stretch, they showed up and they did show out, exposing Denver's inexperience and holding them scoreless after that opening drive. Denver's defense, however, couldn't keep up with Buffalo's offense as the Bills just kind of dinked and dimed them, right? For long, lengthy drives, they were content with getting little short gains as they worked their way down the field. They scored on 6 of their first 7 drives, and then that final drive, the only reason they didn't score is because they ran the clock out. So, very well put together performance, very well executed by the Buffalo Bills to get that dominant victory, like I said, over the Denver Broncos. So next up, like I said, they get these Baltimore Ravens, who are fresh off of their own convincing and dominating victory as well. Over a reeling, but still division rival Pittsburgh Steelers. So we were right on that side of things, right? Like I said, we did hit that one. We were on the Baltimore side. And they jumped on Pittsburgh early, and they never looked back, man. They scored touchdowns on 3 of their 4 first half drives. They took a 21-0 lead into halftime. And then from there, they just played comfortably with the lead, played Baltimore Raven football. They dominated that run game. Both really offensively and defensively. So how dominating, you might ask? Well, 299 total rushing yards for the Ravens, 29 total rushing yards for Pittsburgh. Yes, 29 for the Steelers, a typical running team. So excellent display there by that Baltimore defense. They controlled the clock as well, just like the Bills did in their game. They held a 19-minute edge in time of possession. And while both teams played a clean game in this one as well with no turnovers, Pittsburgh was flagged for more than twice the amount of penalties as Baltimore, and then they couldn't take advantage of any of their limited opportunities when they did get the ball. They could only muster, 11 total first downs in this contest compared to the Ravens' 29. So both of these teams, man, they're coming into this one with all the momentum for sure, right? And of course, both of them come in with their MVP candidate quarterbacks, both of who also come into these playoffs hearing the same narrative about their previous postseason struggles. right? Lamar has now played in 7 playoff games. He's gone 3-4 with just 1 trip to the AFC Championship in that span. He's got a QB rating of 81.2 in those games. He's thrown for 8 touchdowns with 6 interceptions. Now you look at Allen, he's now played in 11 postseason battles, and he's fared better number-wise, right? He's gone 6-5, but he's also just had 1 trip to the AFC Championship. He's had a QB rating of 102.3. He's thrown 23 touchdowns to just 4 picks. Yet he has seen his season end in this divisional round each of the last 3 seasons, with the last 2 defeats coming at home. Unfortunately for him, he's ran into Burrow, and then he ran into Mahomes, 3 different times? So he's had a tough go, man. Just hasn't had the support from his team in general. Because like I said, his numbers have not looked bad at all, right? So definitely could use some help from the supporting cast to make it to the AFC Championship round in this one, going up against this Baltimore defense. But still looking at both those quarterbacks, they're now both in year number 7. They're both seeking their first Super Bowl appearance, and a win here is going to put them, obviously, 1 game away from reaching that goal, but then that sends the other home, kind of hammering in that postseason struggle narrative even further. So we know that this is on the minds of both of these guys heading into this matchup. So definitely just another storyline to look at with this one. So looking at the Bills, they've now won 11 of their last 13, and one of those losses was a throwaway, right? That's a Week 18 meaningless game to close out the season, one in which multiple starters were resting the majority of, if not all of the game. And while they've had some offensive explosions, though, to close out the year, they've scored 40 or more 3 of the last 5 games. They also had some issues on the defensive side of the ball, giving up over 40 twice in that span and an average of just under 29 points per game. And yes, we did just see them hold Denver to 7, like I said, and they did play a great game defensively. Completely stifled them the rest of the game after giving up that opening drive touchdown. I get it. But are we really about to start trusting this Baltimore defense after one good outing against a young Denver team that was ahead of time with their rebuild, right? They exceeded expectations just getting to the playoffs. And then a team that, they've struggled throughout much of this season to get a run game going to complement Bo Nix in that passing game. So, especially down the stretch, that run game was kind of becoming non-existent for Denver. That's an area that Buffalo is kind of vulnerable in defensively, right? So, definitely, I got my question marks still. I don't know if I'm ready to buy in on the Buffalo defense just yet. The Ravens, on the other hand, they walk into high mark on a 5-game winning streak, but what's been most impressive is the dominance displayed in each of those victories, as none of those wins were ever in doubt. The Ravens just rolled in all 5, right? They've outscored their opponents in those 5 games 163-57. Man, I'll say that again, 163-57. Man, we got to keep it 100 though. Yes, 2 of those victories were over the struggling Giants and the struggling Browns. Sure. 2 more of those victories were over the Steelers, and look, while the Steelers struggled down the stretch, man, their 4 losses to close the season were to 3 playoff teams, and then a Bengals team that was desperate for a win to keep their playoff hopes alive. So, you got to give a little bit of credit there to the Steelers, who they were playing, as to a reason to see such a slide. They definitely weren't on the level of the Browns and the Giants this season, right? This was still a decent team. They still won 10 games. They still made the playoffs. But to get back on topic, the other team Baltimore beat during that 5-game win streak just happens to be the Texans, who also advanced into this divisional round. And Baltimore smoked them, right? 31-2. That game was over before it started, man. So head-to-head, the Bills and the Ravens, we've seen these 2 teams split in the 4 meetings that they've played since Allen and Jackson both have started, or took over the starting duties, with the most recent meeting being just earlier this season, a 35-10 Ravens beatdown of the Bills in Baltimore. And they did so in that one just as they have through many games this season on the ground. King Henry took that first handoff to the house, 87 yards for a touchdown on his way to 199 yards rushing on the day. And the Ravens gained 271 total yards on the ground while holding Buffalo to just 81. They were overall just the more efficient unit throughout that contest. They gained 10 more first downs. They hit on third down at a 56% rate as compared to a 23% conversion rate for the Bills in that contest. They gained a total of 427 yards. They averaged 7.9 yards, just under 8 yards per play, while the Bills mustered just 236 yards and 4.1 yards per play. Man, as soon as I just said that they just mustered, I just hear Kendrick in my head. Mustard! So go ahead and comment mustard down below for me, guys. But hey, man, look, the Ravens were just all over the Bills in that first matchup. There's no other way to cut it. Like, they just dominated them in that first matchup, specifically, like I said, on the ground. And that kind of ties into this one here, man. Temperatures at kickoff are expected to be in the low teens at best, and we have a good chance of seeing some snow flurries coming down as well, and I think that's going to play a huge factor in this, man. The colder, nastier, and more snowy this environment becomes, the more I'd start to feel pretty good about looking in the direction of Baltimore. And man, I've gone back and forth on this one all damn week. Look, I'm gonna give you a little backstory real quick. I was traveling for work this week. I ended up in Missouri for the week, Monday through Thursday. And man, I found out, unfortunately, I did a quick little Google search before I left. Is sports betting legal in Missouri? I get a yes. Oh, bet. Good deal, man. So I get there and I start trying to open up my accounts, and all of a sudden it's saying location not verified. You're in a location where sports betting is not allowed. Blah, 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 blah. Turns out it is legalized. They just haven't put anything into effect yet. None of these books are up and ready. So I had a long week of not being able to put anything in on anything, right? So I had plenty of time to just dive into this game. I said, I'm going to utilize my time that I would spend on each night capping some college basketball games, this, that, and the other. I'm just going to look at this game and see what we can come up with, right? So, like I said, I went back and forth all week, man. And if you look at this, it's one of those games that if you look at the line, like I said, Buffalo opened up as a short favorite. It's now swept over to Baltimore. They're a very short favorite as well. You can see Vegas is calling this a coin flip as well, man. So it's one of them games that you can make a case for either side. You really can. Like, Allen has at least individually outperformed Jackson so far in the postseason in their careers. Like I said, he's just unfortunately ran into Burrow once, and then Mahomes, like I said, three times now. Their lack of a run game in those years hurt tremendously. Allen was the run game. But with Cook establishing his role in the backfield and the Bills being at home in this one and Allen playing the best ball of his life, like I said, you can definitely make a case. You can make a strong case for Buffalo at that even, you know what I mean? But end of the day, I'm leaning Baltimore here, and the reason being is, like I mentioned, a big factor, this weather, that frigid cold temperature. It could potentially going to be a snowy game. At least some snow flurries following down on them as they're playing. Man, I just look in those kind of games, man. What is it? It's a run game, right? That's what we can expect. We can expect both these teams to lean on the run. So in some low teen weather, leaning on the run game, I'm going to trust in Lamar and Henry over Allen and Cook. And I'm going to trust a Baltimore defense that has looked better over the second half of the season. They started off shaky, and they've improved and progressed as the season has gone on. And man, they look damn good here at the end of the year, right? I'm going to take them over a Bills defense that, like, they've stumbled down the stretch, and obviously Buffalo had some injuries to overcome at the beginning of the year, Milano being out. They had a handful of injuries, like I said, both sides of the ball to overcome. But the thing for me is that, like I said, they've stumbled down the stretch as opposed to the Bills defensively, as opposed to the Ravens, kind of like full force going into these playoffs, man. Hot on both sides of the ball, right? So, like I said, I'm going to lean the Ravens in this one. I'm just going to take them over that Bills defense all day. And they were already exposed once by this Baltimore team on the ground earlier this year, as we already discussed. Now, look, this Baltimore offense, though, it's no joke either, right? I get it. Like I said, if you're on the Bills side, man, it would be hard to talk anybody off of the Bills side right now. It's just one of them. Like I said, it's up in the air, man. 30 rushing touchdowns and 30 passing touchdowns on the year as a team, setting NFL records. And from a DVOA ranking perspective, they sit at second in passing, fourth on the ground, second overall on offense. So it's not a bad unit whatsoever. The Ravens defensively, they rank sixth overall, right? DVOA, eighth against the pass, fourth against the run. Then defensively, the Bills are 8th defending against the run and just 14th defending against the pass. So that's good for only 11th overall DVOA rankings, while the Ravens offense is sitting at first in passing, first in rushing, first overall. So just both sides of the ball, man. Baltimore has that slight edge, in my opinion. Now, we do need to mention that while both of these teams come into this one, pretty clean injury-wise, like surprisingly clean this late in the season, we do still see Baltimore's wide receiver one, Zay Flowers, listed as questionable. And he's unlikely to suit up in this one, man. But like I said last week, this team still has plenty of weapons. Bateman stepped up, Aguilar, Andrews, likely. And you still got that beast in the backfield, Derrick Henry, right? So, like I said, I think more importantly, though, this just furthers the need for Baltimore to lean on that run. And as much as I went back and forth on this one, that's the one thing I can't get to. I can't see or find a way that Baltimore contains both Henry and Lamar on the ground. I just can't get there. I don't know how they do that. Lamar is playing as close to an unstoppable brand of football that you can see, man, that I've ever seen, right? He's got a big, dominant, bruising back behind him in Henry, and I just believe overall he's got more weapons at his disposal. I mean, 41 passing touchdowns to 6 interceptions with 4,000 yards passing while doing what he's been able to do on the ground as well. Incredible, incredible. So, like I said, man, I just got to lean that direction. I think his passing attack, the Ravens' passing attack, just slightly edges Buffalo's, right? I think these two teams they're pretty similar in their styles and how they play. I just think Baltimore, if you look at each aspect of it, the run game, the pass game, then you look at the defense and how they defend against the run, how they defend against the pass. It's like Baltimore just has a slight edge in each category, right? And so looking at everything, it's like the only edges I can really find for Buffalo is that they're at home, right? But like we've seen them lose at home the last 2 years in this divisional round, like I said. So if that's the only like real edge that I could find, the only real, look at weighing strengths and weaknesses, weighing advantages and disadvantages, I'm just finding way more in the favor of Baltimore. And like I said, they're like little slight favors, right? Just slight things that kind of push the needle just a little bit in Baltimore's direction. So it's enough for me that, like I said, I'm going to lean Ravens on the spread. But if I end up playing the side here, which I'm not sure that I will, this might just be one that I look at the total, throw some props in. But if I'm going to play the side, I'm going to look at the Ravens, and I would probably just throw it in on the money line. You got the money line sitting at minus 112, I think, at minus 1.5. Ravens minus 1.5 is like minus 105 right now, minus 102 maybe. Might as well just hit that money line, right? Like I said, man, that's where I'm leaning in that direction. So let's go ahead and talk about the total. Looking at that, man, at 51.5. Feels pretty high to me, considering the weather expected, the ground games of both. Now, I know both these offenses are juggernauts, right? And that's probably where that number gets in at that level right there. But the Ravens in general limit your opportunities on the offensive side of the ball. And they do so controlling time of possession. They're able to accomplish that with that elite running attack, right? And this has kind of been Baltimore's MO for years, man. They keep the ball out of your hands, and they've been able to do that, pre-Derrick Henry. So you just throw this man in the mix, and it's just that much harder to get opportunities on the offensive side of the ball when you're playing against them. So you really have to take advantage of every single opportunity you get, limit turnovers, because one turnover can be the difference when you're playing the Baltimore Ravens. With all that said, man, on the season, we've seen the Bills hit under this 51.5 total line at a 67% rate. We've seen the Ravens hit under it at a 61% rate. And then head-to-head, these two have hit under in 8 of their last 10 meetings, and then they've landed under this specific line in 7 straight games. The last time they went over this line here, October of 2010. Yeah, give me the under here. That's the direction that I'm leaning for this game. Now let's go ahead and jump over to Outlier. That way we can dive into some of these player props. First up, I'm looking at Lamar Jackson. I'm taking his passing attempts under 28.5. We can get this at Bet365 right now for the best price, minus 115. And we can see this insight from Outlier. He has failed to exceed 28.5 passing attempts in 4 of his last 5 games now, averaging 23 in those, so at 80% hit rate in his last 5 games. Let's go ahead and look at him for the season 2024. It's still over 50%, sitting at 56%, 10 of his last 18. And then head-to-head when they met earlier this year in that blowout, only 18 passing attempts, right? Which is, expected in a blowout scenario like that where you are dominating on the ground. But if we expect them to dominate on the ground once again in this one, like I do, then what do we need to see Lamar drop back and throw 29 pass attempts for? I don't think it's going to be necessary, not out there in that frigid cold. So this is the first play that I'm looking at right here. Lamar Jackson under 28.5 passing attempts. And then last up, like I said, I'm looking for Derrick Henry to be dominant in this one and push the Ravens into the championship game. So why would I not look at his props? And we can find a rush plus receiving yards for over 103.5 at minus 115 on Bet365. This kind of feels like a steal right here. Let's go ahead and hop on over, look at the Bills against the rush, rushing yards allowed and receiving yards allowed against running backs specifically. Middle of the pack, 17th as far as rushing yards allowed. They are dead last in terms of receiving yards given up. And we can see this insight from Outlier. He's actually averaging 145 rushing plus receiving yards in his last 7 games, clearing this mark. Clearing it, man, by over 40 yards. So you love to see that, man. A lot of green, and just like I said, smashing that. There's the line down here, and here's where he's landing. Just smashing it, man. And it's been that way for much of the season, right? You just keep pushing it back. 80% in the last 5, 70% in the last 10, 61% on the year. And then head-to-head had that explosive game earlier on the year, 209 total yards between rushing and receiving. So I like this, man. Like I said, man, if I'm looking for the Ravens to dominate this one on the ground, I got to look Derrick Henry's way as far as a prop is concerned. So I definitely like this, combining it with the reception yards, looking at the Bills and their struggles against running backs out of the backfield catching those passes. So Derrick Henry over 103.5 rushing and receiving yards. Is going to do it here for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. I hope you found it helpful and useful. And if you did, please do not forget to smash that like button down there and hit subscribe, please, if you have not already. Man, let's enjoy this divisional round and make a little bit of cash in the process. And I'll see you guys back for the championship round